The alien academy on the edge of the Orion cluster was alive with voices. Students of many species gathered in the Great Hall, their different shapes, colors, and voices mixing together into one restless noise. The academy was a place where young minds learned about history, strategy, and the cultures of the galaxy. The teachers encouraged open debate, and the students enjoyed testing their ideas against each other. Today, the subject of debate was not science or trade, but the strange new ban that had been issued across several worlds. The ban was simple. Alien cadets and academies were no longer allowed to practice or imitate human combat methods. The reason given was vague. It said the methods were dangerous and unsuitable for non-humans. For the students gathered in the hall, this seemed like a joke. They laughed at the thought that fragile humans could be so dangerous that the entire academy system had to forbid their ways. A tall insectoid student, with 6 limbs folded neatly against its body, clicked its mandibles together in amusement. "Humans?" it said, its voice sharp. "They are soft creatures. Their skin tears easily. Their bones break quickly. How can such weak bodies create methods that threaten us?" Another student, scaled and serpent-like, coiled its long body around a bench as it spoke. Maybe their leaders think too highly of themselves. Maybe the humans begged the councils to make the ban so they could pretend to be dangerous. Then the laughter grew. Dozens of voices joined in, each one finding new ways to mock the humans. Some called them reckless, others called them foolish. A few even called them suicidal for the wars they fought on their own planet. The students treated the subject like a game, each trying to outdo the other in insult. Among the crowd was a group of human exchange visitors. They sat quietly, not joining in the laughter. 2 of them stood apart from the students. One was a tall woman with steady eyes, dressed in the formal robes of a lecturer. Her name was Laura Bennett. She was not only a teacher but also a researcher of human history. Beside her was a man named Daniel Brooks, younger but calm, with a soldier's bearing that had never left him even after he left the service. They had come to the academy to share knowledge, but they knew this day would not be easy. Now Laura watched the mocking students with no anger, only patience. She had seen this before. Across many worlds, young aliens laughed at humanity until they learned more. Daniel, standing quietly beside her, crossed his arms and said nothing. He knew that words would not change the minds of those who had never seen the truth. And the debate grew louder. One student, whose smooth skin shimmered in shades of blue, raised his voice to call for attention. "Why should we fear humans?" he asked boldly. "They nearly destroyed themselves with their own wars. They polluted their own world. They are a young species. We have seen their bodies. They are not built for power or endurance. Why then should we ban their combat methods? It makes no sense." The students applauded his words, their voices rising with excitement. They wanted answers. They wanted to hear the humans defend themselves. Some leaned forward eagerly as if ready for a contest. The hall filled with a kind of charged energy, as though the students thought they were about to win a great argument. And Laura waited until the noise settled. Then she spoke, her voice calm and steady. "You laugh at the ban because you do not understand why it exists. You think humans asked for it. You think it is a joke, but it is not." Her words caught the attention of the hall. The mocking voices quieted, though some still smirked. Laura stepped forward, her robe brushing against the floor. Daniel stayed beside her, his dark eyes scanning the students, watching their movements, their expressions. "You ask why the councils respect human combat methods," Laura continued. "The answer is simple. Because they have seen them, and they know what happens when other species try to copy them. It is not safe. Not for you. Not for any of you." And the students exchanged confused glances. One of them, a young creature with thin, translucent skin and glowing veins, raised a trembling hand. "We have studied many species," it said. "We have read of the old wars of the Vec and the sieges of the Kuroth. Their methods were brutal. Why should humans be worse?" Then Laura looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod, then turned to the students. His voice was low but carried across the hall. "Have you ever seen real human battle footage?" The question was met with silence. The students looked at one another, puzzled. Finally, the insectoid who had spoken earlier gave a clicking laugh. "Of course not. The footage is hidden. Why would humans hide their history unless they are ashamed?" And then Daniel shook his head slowly. "It is not hidden. It is protected. Because once you see it, you cannot forget it. Once you see what humans do when pushed, you understand why this ban exists. The alien students scoffed, though less boldly now. A few muttered that no recording could surprise them. They had seen simulations of great wars fought across galaxies. They had seen their own people battle in the past. What could humans possibly show them that would matter? When Laura raised the small device she carried in her hand, a simple black module unremarkable in appearance. She pressed her fingers to its surface and a faint hum filled the air. The walls of the hall shimmered as projectors activated, turning the smooth surfaces into wide windows of light. The alien students leaned forward, curious now. Their earlier laughter faded into quiet anticipation. They wanted to see what humans thought would silence them. Before the first image appeared, Laura spoke again. Understand this. What you're about to see is not fiction. It is not story. It is truth. These are records of human history. Every moment you will see was lived. Every choice was made by men and women who stood where death was certain, and still they stood. Her words gave the students pause. Some shifted uneasily in their seats. Others scoffed quietly, unwilling to show doubt. Daniel folded his arms again and stepped back. He had seen this footage many times, but he still felt its weight. He knew what was coming. The first image came to life. The light spread across the hall and the sound of battle filled the air. Explosions thundered, shouts rang out, and the ground shook beneath marching boots. The alien students gasped as the sight unfolded. Rows of human soldiers, mud on their faces, smoke in the air, marched into battle with rifles in their hands. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they moved forward anyway. The laughter that had filled the hall earlier was gone. Only silence remained, broken by the sounds of war projected around them. Laura and Daniel exchanged a glance. The debate was over, though the students did not yet realize it. What followed would change the way they saw humanity forever. The great hall of the Alien Academy was silent as the first images faded into darkness. The students, who had mocked so loudly only moments before, now sat frozen. Their eyes were wide, their voices caught in their throats. Some leaned forward. Others pressed their bodies back as if the vision itself carried weight. The sound of human voices shouting orders still echoed faintly in their ears. And Laura Bennett allowed the silence to stretch. She wanted them to feel the stillness, to let the weight of what they had seen sink in. Beside her, Daniel Brooks stood firm, his arms crossed, his face calm. He had seen this countless times, the mocking at the beginning, the shock that followed. Every time the reaction was the same. Words could be denied, but the truth of the footage could not. And finally, a scaled student broke the silence. Its voice trembled slightly. That was real? And Laura nodded. It was real. It was one battle among thousands. Humans have faced hopeless fights again and again. They did not always win, but they never stopped. Even when logic said they should surrender, they chose to fight. The insectoid who had spoken first clicked its mandibles nervously. But why? Why move forward when defeat is certain? What sense does that make? Daniel stepped forward now. His deep voice carried across the hall. It makes no sense if you look at survival alone. But humans are not guided only by survival. We are guided by something else: duty, loyalty, belief, call it what you want. It is what makes us different. When a human decides to hold a line, they do not care what logic says. They care about the choice. And the serpent-like student who had coiled around the bench earlier flicked its tongue in agitation. But you are fragile. If your bodies break, how can such choices matter? Once dead, there is nothing. Daniel gave a thin smile. Yes, our bodies break. Yes, we die. But what matters is what happens before death. What matters is what we leave behind. A choice to stand changes the battle. Sometimes it changes the war. That is why the ban exists. Your bodies may be stronger than ours, but your minds are not ready for what these choices demand. The students shifted again. Some still looked doubtful, but others no longer sneered. They had seen the eyes of the human soldiers in the footage, their fear, their pain, and yet their determination. That look was not something the aliens recognized. It was not something they had seen in their own people. And Laura activated the device again. What you saw was the beginning. But there is more. You mocked the ban because you thought it meant nothing. Now you will see why your elders placed it. And then the walls lit once more. This time the images showed a ruined city. Buildings stood shattered, smoke rising from the ruins. In the streets, small groups of humans fought against overwhelming forces. They were surrounded by machines larger than them, enemies with more weapons and armor. Yet the humans moved with a strange rhythm, covering each other, advancing step by step, never abandoning the wounded. And one alien student whispered, "They should retreat. It is pointless." But the humans on the screen did not retreat. A soldier, dragging one leg, still lifted his weapon and fired until his body could move no more. Another, his uniform torn and stained, lifted a fallen comrade over his shoulder and carried him into cover. They fought as if surrender was impossible. The students could not look away. Their earlier arrogance crumbled with each passing moment. For the first time, they understood why words had never been enough. Only the sight of humans in battle could explain what reason could not. Tan and Laura's voice broke the silence once again. "Your people believe strength is in the body. You believe long life or hard skin or sharp claws make you powerful. Humans have none of those. We live short lives. Our bodies fail. But our strength is in choice. That is why our ways are dangerous to you. If you try to copy them, you will break yourselves." The young student with translucent skin raised a trembling hand. "But is it not madness? To fight when there is no hope? To give life when defeat is sure?" Nian Daniel's gaze softened. He remembered the faces of men and women he had served with. "Some call it madness. We call it humanity. When there is no hope, sometimes one act can still matter. A single stand can buy time for others to escape. A single soldier can carry the fight long enough for victory to grow elsewhere. To us, it is not madness. It is meaning." And the serpent-like student hissed quietly. "Meaning, even in death?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "Even in death." The hall grew heavy with silence once more. The alien students had no more jokes. Their bright arrogance had dimmed into troubled thought. They realized that humans saw the world differently, and that difference was not weakness but something they had no words for. Tand Laura turned off the device for now. She did not want to overwhelm them all at once. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes moving across the crowd. "The ban exists because your elders respect what they saw. They know that if young ones like you tried to follow these methods, you would destroy yourselves. Our ways were born in struggle. They are not safe to copy. They were not meant to be safe. They were meant to survive." Danae, student in the back, small and bird-like, finally spoke up in a clear tone. "So this is why humans are feared. Not for your bodies, not for your machines, but for your will." Then Laura gave a slow nod. "Yes, that is why," and the students sat in silence. No one mocked now. Some looked down, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Others looked thoughtful, their minds racing as they tried to fit this new knowledge into their understanding of the galaxy. They had come to the debate certain of their own superiority. Now they were less sure. And Daniel let the silence linger before speaking one final time. "You asked why the ban exists. Now you know. Humans do not need others to fear us. We would prefer peace. But if you force us into battle, you will see why the councils acted. We do not stop. We do not surrender. And that truth cannot be banned." Now the words hung in the hall like a shadow. The alien students sat still, not daring to answer. They understood now that their laughter had been born of ignorance. The lesson had only begun, but already they felt the weight of it pressing down on them. They would never look at humans the same way again. Anne and Laura and Daniel stood together at the front of the hall. They exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding between them. The students had seen only the beginning. There was much more to show. The real lesson would come next, and with it, the full reason why humanity's methods had been forbidden. But for now, the silence was enough. The silence was the first step. The silence meant the mocking was over. The air in the academy hall was heavy. The alien students did not speak as the lights returned to normal. Their faces in all their strange forms showed the same look of unease. Some clutched their study tablets tightly. Others folded their arms as if to protect themselves. The earlier mocking laughter was gone. Only silence remained. Laura Bennett stood in front of them, holding the small black module in her hand. She could feel the weight of their silence pressing back at her. Daniel Brooks stood beside her, still and calm, though his eyes searched the crowd. He was used to seeing this change in young alien students. They entered with pride, sure of their own strength, but left with troubled thoughts after watching what humans had endured. And Laura spoke slowly, her voice steady. You have seen a glimpse of what humanity has faced. What you saw was not the worst. It was only a fraction of what our history carries. Do you still think the ban on human combat methods is a joke? No one answered. The insectoid who had mocked earlier clicked its mandibles softly, but made no sound of laughter. The serpent-like student who had coiled itself on the bench shifted uncomfortably, its long body twitching. The glowing-skinned student looked down at its hands, ashamed of its earlier words, and Daniel's deep voice filled the hall. You do not yet understand. What you saw was the outside, the battles, the movements, the actions. What you did not see was the inside. You did not feel what it means to be human when facing death and refusing to turn away. That is the part no recording can fully show. That is why your elders feared letting you copy our ways. The bird-like student with feathers of silver lifted a trembling hand. Show us more. We need to see. Laura studied the faces before her. They were no longer mocking, but curious, afraid, and eager to understand. She gave a small nod. Very well. But you must prepare yourselves. What comes next is not easy to watch. It is not glory. It is not victory. It is survival. She touched the device again. The walls glowed and shifted. Once more, the students were surrounded by visions from Earth's history. This time, the scenes were darker. The projectors showed long marches through frozen wastelands. Men and women with frostbitten hands still carrying their weapons. They showed burned cities where survivors dug through rubble to pull out the wounded. They showed soldiers standing ankle-deep in mud for days, never leaving their posts. None in the serpent student hissed softly. They should fall. Their bodies should fail. And Daniel shook his head. Many did fall. Many did fail. But enough stayed. Enough endured. And that is all it takes. Humanity does not need perfection. We only need enough. And the students shivered as they watched. The footage shifted again, showing a group of young men and women in a training field. They ran with heavy packs, climbed walls, and crawled through dirt while their instructors shouted at them. Their faces showed exhaustion, but none of them stopped. Some collapsed, but their comrades lifted them, refusing to leave anyone behind. Yanane-scaled student whispered, "Why carry the weak? It slows them. It risks the mission." Daniel's gaze hardened. Because to humans, leaving someone behind is worse than failure. Strength is not only measured by what one can do alone. It is measured by what we do for each other. That is why our methods break other species. You are taught to value only the strong. We are taught to value the bond. And the students were quiet again. Their thoughts churned as they tried to understand this strange idea. To them, survival often meant the strong rising above the weak. To humans, survival meant no one was abandoned if it could be helped. The difference unsettled them. Net and Laura let the footage roll. It showed battles fought in jungles where rain poured endlessly. Yet humans marched on. It showed men and women building bridges under fire just to move supplies. It showed civilians, untrained and afraid, still rising to defend their homes when armies approached. The images did not glorify war. They showed the cost, the pain, and the determination. One of the younger alien students began to cry softly, its small body shaking. The sight of humans carrying on despite wounds, despite loss, broke something inside of it. Another student reached out to comfort it, but their own hands trembled. Gin and Laura spoke gently. Now you understand. Human strength is not about power. It is not about long life or perfect bodies. It is about spirit. It is about the choice to keep moving when everything tells you to stop. The insectoid finally spoke again, its voice low and uncertain. But why? Why do you not give up? Why keep moving when all is lost? Tana Daniel's face was unreadable as he answered. Because giving up means nothing changes. Because even if one person falls, another can stand. And sometimes one act of defiance is enough to turn despair into hope. That is why. The serpent student uncoiled itself, lowering its head. This is why the ban exists. If we tried to follow your ways, we would destroy ourselves. We are not made for this. Merlin and Laura nodded. You are correct. Your people are not weak. You are strong in other ways. But humanity's way is not yours. It is dangerous for you to try. Your bodies may copy the moves, but your minds cannot carry the burden. That is why the councils forbade it. Not to praise us, not to protect us, but to protect you. And the hall remained quiet. The students no longer looked at the humans as curiosities or jokes. They looked at them with a kind of respect and even fear. They realized that humanity's reputation was not built on boasting. It was built on a history of survival no other race could match. In end, Daniel turned to Laura. "That is enough for today." But the bird-like student shook its head quickly. "No, show us more. Please. We must understand fully." Laura studied their faces again. She saw the hunger for knowledge, but also the fear. She knew showing more would change them forever. Still, she gave a slow nod. "Very well. One last piece for now." And the walls lit up again. This time the footage was of a single human standing alone on a broken bridge. His comrades had fallen, his body was wounded, but he held his weapon and refused to leave. Enemy forces advanced, machines and soldiers alike. The human fired until his weapon clicked empty. Then he drew a knife and stood his ground. The footage cut to black before the end. The students gasped. Some covered their eyes. Others whispered in disbelief. The hall was filled with the sound of heavy breathing, as if every student had fought that battle themselves. And Laura turned off the device. She looked at the crowd and said softly, "That is humanity. That is why we do not laugh when others mock us. We know who we are, and now so do you." And the students bowed their heads. None dared to speak. They knew the ban was not foolishness. It was wisdom. They would never mock again. Andrew and Daniel glanced at Laura. "The lesson has begun. They will never forget this." And she nodded. "Yes, and tomorrow they will see even more." Then the human pair stood together facing the quiet hall. Around them, alien students sat in silence, their hearts heavy with new understanding. The mocking was gone. In its place was something. The night cycle came to the academy, but the alien students did not sleep easily. In their dormitories, they whispered about what they had seen. The images of human battles played again and again in their minds. Some admitted they felt shaken. Others confessed they felt ashamed for mocking what they did not understand. A few even said they felt fear. No one wanted to laugh anymore. The ban on human combat training no longer seemed like a foolish rule. It now seemed like a shield, protecting them from something too heavy to carry. When the next gathering was called, the students came quietly. The great hall felt different from the day before. There was no loud chatter, no mocking voices. The students sat in their places, their eyes fixed on the front where Laura Bennett and Daniel Brooks stood once again. The humans had not come to gloat or to enjoy the change in mood. They had come to finish the lesson. Anna and Laura looked at the rows of alien faces. She saw curiosity, unease, and respect. Her voice was soft but clear when she spoke. "Yesterday you saw our battles. You saw how humans fight, how they endure. But there is more you must understand. To know why the ban exists, you must see not only how we fight, but also why we fight." Nanoon, the serpent-like student, raised its head. "We saw enough. You showed us hopeless battles and humans who fought until death. What more is there?" And Daniel answered, his deep voice steady. "What you saw were battles against enemies and against the odds. What you did not see was how humans fight even when the enemy is not another species or machine, but nature itself. You must see how we survive in places where no one should survive. That is part of what makes us what we are." Laura touched the black module again, and the walls of the hall shimmered to life. The students leaned forward, bracing themselves for more visions. This time, the images showed vast landscapes, endless deserts where the sun burned so hot that the air seemed to waver. Frozen mountains where snowstorms howled and buried everything. Deep jungles where the ground itself seemed alive, filled with poison and danger. In each place, the students saw small groups of humans moving through the land. They were exhausted, but they kept walking. They were hungry, but they kept going. They built shelters from nothing, lit fires in storms, hunted for food in empty places, and carried one another when legs failed. The insectoid student clicked softly. "These places? Even our strongest would not last long here." Laura nodded. "And yet humans have lived in such places for thousands of years. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. Nature did not spare us. It tested us and we survived. That is another reason the ban exists. Our methods were shaped by this constant struggle. To copy them is to take on burdens your bodies and minds were not shaped to bear." Camden, the students watched as a group of humans, trapped in a snowstorm, huddled together for warmth. Some shielded others with their own bodies, refusing to let the weakest freeze. In the desert scenes, they saw soldiers digging into the ground to find water, sharing every drop even when it meant none of them had enough. In the jungles, they saw men and women pressing forward through mud and sickness, carrying one another despite fever and pain. The glowing-skinned student whispered, "They do not abandon each other. Even when it risks all of them, they stay together." Daniel gave a single nod. "That is our way. It is what gives us strength. To fight alone is to die. To fight together is to endure. You see weakness when one helps another. We see strength. That is the difference." And then the footage shifted again. This time it showed moments of rebuilding. Humans walked among ruins, lifting stones, raising walls again. They cleared rubble with bare hands, searching for survivors. They planted crops in burned fields. They built homes from scraps. The students watched as whole cities, once destroyed, rose again piece by piece. It was slow, painful work, but the humans never stopped. And Laura's voice carried softly. "You see now why surrender does not live in us. Because even when all seems lost, we rebuild. We do not let destruction be the end. That spirit cannot be taught in your training halls. It comes only from living through the fire again and again." And then the bird-like student tilted its head, its feathers trembling. "So this is what makes humans different. Not just how you fight, but how you refuse to end even when all is broken." Laura gave a small smile. "Yes, that is the truth." Then the students sat in silence, but their silence was no longer only fear. It was also awe. They saw humans not only as warriors, but as survivors of endless trials. The ban, once seen as a strange rule, now appeared as wisdom beyond their young minds. And Daniel stepped forward. His eyes swept across the room, his voice firm. "Understand this. Humanity does not seek to rule you. We do not want you to fear us. We want you to understand why our ways are forbidden for you. Your people have their own strengths. They do not need ours. If you try to follow our path, you will break because it was never meant for you. Our path is ours alone." The serpent student lowered its head. "Then our mocking was foolish. We thought you weak. We thought you fragile. But now we see. What you have is not weakness. It is something we cannot name." And Daniel looked at Laura, then back at the students. "You do not need to name it. You only need to respect it. That is enough." And the insectoid raised one claw hesitantly. "But if humans are so strong, will you not become a danger to us all? Will your way not lead you to conquer others?" And Laura answered softly, "Strength does not always mean conquest. Our history is filled with war, yes, but also with peace. We have fought each other as much as we have fought others. We do not see ourselves as supreme. We see ourselves as survivors. That is all, and sometimes that is enough to make others fear us." The students looked at each other, thoughtful and uneasy. They realized that their elders had been wise. They realized that mocking humans was not only foolish but dangerous. Now they knew why the councils had spoken with such caution about Earth. Laura turned off the device and placed it back in her robe. She looked at the crowd and said, "The lesson is almost finished. But before it ends, you must ask yourselves one thing. If you had seen what we have seen, lived what we have lived, would you still laugh at the ban?" And the hall was silent. Not a single student spoke. Not a single voice dared to answer. Daniel gave a final nod. "Then the lesson has worked." And Laura and Daniel stepped back, leaving the silence to linger. The alien students sat still, lost in thought. Their earlier pride broken into humility. For the first time, they truly understood the truth behind the ban. It was not about weakness. It was not about fear. It was about respect for a species that had survived what no others could. Dan and the human pair left the hall together, their steps quiet. Behind them, the alien students remained, each one changed in ways they could not yet describe. None of them would ever mock humanity again. None of them would ever forget what they had seen. The footage had burned itself into their memories and the lesson had taken root. And though they did not yet know it, this new respect for humans would spread beyond the academy walls. It would reach their worlds, their families, and their leaders. The laughter had ended. In its place, something new had begun, a deep, unshakable awareness that humans were. The room stayed quiet for a long time after the final image faded from the walls. The alien students did not move. Their eyes remained fixed on the empty screen as if the ghosts of the humans they had just seen still stood there. No laughter, no mocking, no smug words about human weakness came anymore. The silence was heavy, and the humans who stood before them knew that something deep had shifted. And Laura Bennett stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried through the quiet like a steady wind. She told them the footage was only a small piece of the truth. Humanity's history was full of pain, but also full of survival. "We do not show this to frighten," she said softly. "We show it so that you may understand why the ban exists. It was not made from fear of you. It was made from care for you." And the alien students turned to look at her. Their faces showed confusion. They could not understand why anyone would protect them by hiding such knowledge. Daniel Brooks moved to stand beside her. He folded his arms and looked at the crowd with steady eyes. "You laughed when you heard of the ban," he said. "You thought humans were weak, but you have now seen what weakness does not explain. The ban was not made to honor humans. It was made to shield you from a truth that can break even the strongest of you if taken without respect." One alien stood, his skin pale and his crest trembling. He had been the loudest voice mocking humans earlier. Now his voice was smaller but still clear. "I thought humans were soft," he admitted. "I thought your people depended only on luck. But I saw them walk into fire. I saw them fight when no hope was left. Why do they do this? What pushes them forward when all reason says to fall back?" Laura looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because we choose to," she said. "Because we do not accept the end while there is still a breath in us. That is the truth of our nature. That is why we survive." A soft murmur filled the hall as the alien students spoke to each other in low voices. Some looked troubled, others curious, and a few even seemed inspired. They had never seen such images before. They had studied wars, of course, but from safe distance. Their own species fought carefully, often retreating when battles were not certain. To throw oneself into fire, into sure defeat, was madness to them. Yet humans did it again and again, and sometimes, somehow, they won. Daniel stepped forward again. He said, "Many civilizations have made the mistake of underestimating Earth. Some thought we could be crushed quickly. Some thought our wars would end us. But those who believe this are gone or forced to learn respect. Do not make the same mistake. Do not think our strength is only in our machines. Our strength comes from within." Another alien student raised her voice. She was young and proud, but now her tone held unease. "If what you say is true," she asked, "then why share this with us at all? Why not let the band stay silent and let us remain ignorant?" Laura's eyes softened. "Because ignorance breeds arrogance," she said. "You mocked what you did not know. You laughed at warnings you did not understand. That is dangerous. It was better you see for yourself and learn humility than remain blind." The young alien bowed her head. For the first time she felt the weight of her words earlier and how foolish they had been. Slowly, more voices rose. Some admitted fear. Others confessed admiration. A few spoke of shame, realizing how cruel their mocking laughter had sounded now that they knew the truth. Daniel and Laura listened, not judging, only allowing them to find their own understanding. This was not about forcing respect. It was about showing reality. And hours passed as the discussion grew. Stories of other species clashed with what they had just witnessed. Some aliens argued that spirit alone could not win wars. Laura agreed but reminded them that spirit was what allowed humanity to rise again after falling. Machines could be rebuilt. Cities could be raised again. But without the will to stand, nothing could return. Humanity's gift, she explained, was not perfection but persistence. And at last, the Academy Council entered the hall. They had been watching from the shadows. The elder voices spoke, confirming what Laura and Daniel had shared. They told the young ones that the ban had stood for many years, not as a punishment but as a safeguard. Many alien cadets who tried to copy human training had broken under the strain. Their bodies healed, but their minds did not. That was why the ban remained. Humans carried a fire inside them, but for other species that fire could consume instead of strengthen. The alien students listened with new respect. They no longer argued. They no longer laughed. They bowed their heads and accepted what they had been too proud to hear before. And when the council left, only Laura and Daniel remained with the students. Daniel stepped forward one last time. "You do not have to admire us," he said. "You do not have to follow our ways. All we ask is that you remember what you saw. Remember that strength is not always in size or speed or age of your people. Sometimes it is in choice. Sometimes it is in refusing to fall even when the ground shakes beneath you. None, the alien who had first mocked the loudest, spoke again. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I will not laugh again," he said. "I did not know." "Now I know." Laura gave him a small nod. "That is enough," she said. The students left the hall. Their footsteps were slower, their faces thoughtful. The mocking joy of earlier was gone. In its place was a heavy respect. Some even carried a quiet fear. But it was not hatred. It was the kind of fear that came with deep respect, the kind that reminded them of how fragile pride could be when faced with truth. Later, whispers spread through the academy. Students told others about what they had seen. The story grew, and soon it reached beyond the academy walls. No one laughed anymore at the human ban. No one called it silly or weak. The young ones who had mocked now defended it, warning others not to make the same mistake. In time, the laughter that had once filled the halls was replaced by silence whenever the name of Earth was spoken. Laura and Daniel left the academy quietly. They had not come to win glory. They had only come to share truth. As they boarded their ship, Daniel looked back at the shining towers of the alien academy. "Do you think they understood?" he asked, and Laura gave a faint smile. "They understood enough," she said. "And sometimes enough is all that is needed." The ship lifted into the stars, leaving the academy behind. But the lesson stayed. The alien students would never forget the images of human soldiers charging into fire, of humans standing unbroken in ruins, of cities rising from ash. They would never forget the silence that followed, nor the weight of their own laughter turned to shame, and in that silence they found respect. From that day on, the mocking ended. In its place, a new truth spread across the academies of the Orion cluster. Humanity was not the strongest in body, nor the oldest in age, but when all hope was lost, they stood still. And that more than